In the bustling heart of Tokyo, hidden beneath the neon-lit streets and endless crowds, lies a secret that would revolutionize every spiritual tradition on Earth if it were understood. The Forgiveness Arcade, a subterranean chamber filled with hundreds of vintage arcade machines, each one designed not for entertainment, but for the most sophisticated spiritual trap ever conceived by human consciousness. The games all have the same objective: achieve spiritual enlightenment through perfect forgiveness. Players insert coins of guilt, shame, and regret, then spend hours trying to reach the final level where complete absolution awaits. But there's one figure who moves through this arcade without ever approaching a single machine. She observes the players with profound compassion, yet never participates in their endless quest for forgiveness-based liberation. The Awakened Prophet. She has discovered something that would empty every confession booth, therapy office, and healing workshop on the planet, if people truly understood it. Here's what will completely revolutionize your understanding of prophecy, forgiveness, and spiritual awakening. The Awakened Prophet has realized that false forgiveness operates like a spiritual video game designed to keep players trapped in endless levels of seeking without ever reaching true liberation. Most people approach forgiveness like gamers approaching a complex video game. They believe there are levels to complete, points to score, achievements to unlock, and a final boss of complete absolution to defeat. They spend years collecting forgiveness tokens through therapy, spiritual practice, and religious ritual, convinced that accumulating enough will eventually grant them access to the ultimate level of spiritual freedom. But the Awakened Prophet has discovered something disturbing about this spiritual gaming system. It's designed to be unwinnable. If you've spent years playing the forgiveness game, collecting spiritual achievements, working through levels of healing, trying to unlock the final stage of complete self-acceptance, comment "gaming" below. You may be about to discover why the game itself is the trap. This recognition emerged when the Awakened Prophet observed something shocking about the Forgiveness Arcade's design. Every machine is programmed with the same fundamental algorithm. The closer players get to winning, the more difficult the game becomes. Each level of forgiveness achieved unlocks new levels of guilt to process. Each spiritual breakthrough reveals deeper layers of shame requiring attention. Each moment of self-acceptance triggers the discovery of previously hidden areas of self-rejection. The game generates its own content infinitely, ensuring that players never reach a final state of completion where they could stop playing and exit the arcade. But here's where this gets spiritually revolutionary. The Awakened Prophet realized that the forgiveness game doesn't malfunction when it fails to provide final liberation. The endless seeking is the intended function. The spiritual industrial complex thrives on people who believe they're always one more workshop, one more healing session, one more forgiveness breakthrough away from final spiritual achievement. False forgiveness creates the perfect consumer of spiritual services, someone who experiences just enough progress to stay motivated, but never enough completion to stop seeking. This creates something unprecedented in spiritual understanding: the recognition that the solution is the problem, and the healing is the wound. Follow me if you want to understand how the Awakened Prophet's escape from the forgiveness game reveals the immediate availability of what the game promises to deliver eventually. The Awakened Prophet's escape operates through what could be called arcade transcendence, the recognition that the entire gaming environment is optional. While others focus intensely on their screens, desperately trying to advance through levels of forgiveness achievement, she maintains awareness of the larger space in which all the games are taking place. She recognizes that the arcade itself exists within consciousness, and consciousness is not bound by the rules of any game that appears within it. This creates something that forgiveness game players never experience: immediate access to the peace and freedom that the games promise to deliver after sufficient spiritual achievement. The Awakened Prophet demonstrates that you don't need to win the forgiveness game to experience liberation. You just need to recognize that you were never actually trapped by anything the game convinces you to take seriously. Comment optional if you can sense how recognizing the forgiveness game as optional might instantly shift your relationship to spiritual seeking and self-improvement. But the arcade transcendence reveals something even more profound about the nature of prophetic consciousness and its relationship to forgiveness seeking. The Awakened Prophet discovered that every time someone sits down at a forgiveness arcade machine, they temporarily forget their true nature as the consciousness that creates all spiritual games. The game screen becomes hypnotically absorbing, convincing players that their identity is the character on the screen, rather than the awareness observing the character. True prophetic consciousness, however, can only emerge from the recognition of yourself as the space in which all spiritual games appear, rather than as a player within any particular game. When you identify as a character seeking forgiveness, prophetic insight becomes impossible because prophecy requires speaking from the perspective of the consciousness that creates all characters, not from within the limitations of any specific character. This is why authentic prophets throughout history have always spoken with such authority. They're not speaking as someone who has achieved spiritual success within the game. They're speaking as the awareness that recognizes the game as a temporary appearance within unlimited consciousness. And here's what's beautiful about this arcade transcendence. The awakened prophet's perspective creates something that forgiveness gaming never achieves. Messages that emerge from completion rather than from seeking. Her prophetic utterances don't carry the energy of someone trying to heal, improve, or achieve spiritual advancement. They emerge from the recognition that consciousness is already whole, already perfect, already free from any need for the healing that forgiveness games promise to provide. People immediately sense this quality of completion in authentic prophetic expression. There's nothing in the message that's trying to fix anything, achieve anything, or become anything different from what already is. This creates prophetic communication that operates as pure recognition rather than as spiritual instruction or healing intervention. Right completion. If you can feel the difference between messages that emerge from seeking and messages that emerge from the recognition of what was never actually missing, the forgiveness arcade eventually reveals its most sophisticated trap, the advanced spiritual seeker level. These are the machines designed for people who have seen through basic forgiveness games, but still believe in more sophisticated versions of spiritual achievement. The advanced level convinces players that they're beyond needing forgiveness because they've recognized the illusory nature of the separate self that could require forgiveness. But this recognition becomes just another achievement to maintain, another spiritual position to defend, another identity to perfect. The awakened prophet observes players at the advanced level working just as hard as beginners, but now their effort goes into maintaining non-seeking rather than into seeking, into preserving enlightenment rather than into achieving it. This creates the most subtle form of spiritual gaming, playing the game of not playing games. Follow for more content that explores this ultimate level of spiritual trap and how authentic prophecy transcends even the most sophisticated forms of spiritual accomplishment. But the arcade transcendence reveals something that would shock most spiritual teachers: the recognition that even awakening itself can become another forgiveness game. The awakened prophet has observed people spending decades trying to forgive themselves for not being enlightened enough, for having thoughts and emotions, for experiencing human limitations. They create elaborate spiritual practices designed to forgive their humanity and achieve a state of constant transcendent awareness. But this approach turns awakening into just another level of the forgiveness game, complete with points to score, spiritual experiences, achievements to unlock, states of consciousness, and a final boss to defeat, the ego. True prophetic consciousness recognizes that there's nothing to forgive about being human, because humanity is how consciousness chooses to experience itself temporarily. There's nothing wrong with having thoughts, emotions, and limitations that needs to be transcended through spiritual achievement. Comment humanity if you can sense how trying to forgive or transcend your human experience might be missing the point of consciousness, choosing to be human in the first place. The awakened prophet's ultimate demonstration involves something that shocks everyone in the forgiveness arcade. She approaches the most advanced spiritual gaming station, the ultimate enlightenment through perfect forgiveness machine, and instead of playing it, she simply unplugs it from the wall. The screen goes dark. The game stops running. The endless seeking ceases instantly. And in that moment of technological silence, something becomes immediately apparent to everyone watching. The peace and freedom they were trying to achieve through spiritual gaming was already present in the space where the game was happening. The consciousness that was playing the game was never actually trapped by the game's rules or limited by the game's objectives. The liberation they were seeking through forgiveness achievement was the same consciousness that was doing the seeking. This creates the most direct spiritual teaching possible, the recognition that what you're looking for is what's looking. If you're feeling this recognition of your identity as consciousness itself beginning to emerge beyond all spiritual gaming, write "unplugged" below. The arcade eventually reveals its deepest secret. Every machine was always displaying the same fundamental message, disguised as different games with different objectives. You are already what you seek to become through spiritual achievement. The forgiveness games, the healing quests, the enlightenment challenges, all of them were elaborate ways of avoiding the immediate recognition of what was always already present. The awakened prophet's prophetic function becomes the simple demonstration that the arcade is optional, and what it promises to deliver eventually is available immediately, not through achieving anything but through recognizing what was never actually absent. Her prophecies don't predict future spiritual attainments. They reveal present completeness that requires no gaming to access. Follow if you want to explore more of these ultimate recognitions about consciousness and the transcendence of all spiritual seeking and achievement. The awakened prophet's method becomes teachable to anyone willing to step away from the forgiveness arcade machines. She shows people how to recognize themselves as the consciousness in which all spiritual games appear, rather than as characters within any particular game. This recognition happens instantly, when attention shifts from the game screen to the space in which the screen appears. People who make this shift discover something extraordinary about their own prophetic capacity. When they stop trying to achieve spiritual states through forgiveness gaming, they become available for consciousness to express itself directly through their particular configuration. This creates natural prophetic function that emerges from completion rather than from seeking. If this exploration has helped you recognize your own entrapment in forgiveness gaming, or awakened your sense of what exists beyond all spiritual achievement, comment arcade below and share what forgiveness game you feel ready to stop playing. And if you want more content that reveals the immediate availability of what spiritual games promise to deliver eventually, follow now, because we're exploring the territory where consciousness recognizes itself as both the player and the game, the seeker and the sought, the problem and the solution. The next video will reveal why the most authentic spiritual teachers often appear to contradict traditional spiritual advice, and what this teaches us about consciousness evolving beyond fixed spiritual positions. Until then, experiment with stepping away from whatever forgiveness games you've been playing and notice what's already present in the space where the games appear. What if your prophetic capacity is only waiting for you to stop playing spiritual video games and recognize yourself as the consciousness that was never actually trapped by any game's rules or objectives? The answer might be the end of seeking and the beginning of recognizing what you have always been.